Bakole versus Itauma in November projects His Excellency Turki Alashikh. Get this. Turkey wants to put on a bumper card full of very interesting fights in November, including Mark Bakole versus Moses Itauma, Jaron Ennis versus Virgil Ortiz Jr., William Cepeda versus Andy Cruz, and Christian Mbili versus Lester Martinez. That's the card. Although I can't see Frank putting him in there with Bakole, let me counterpunch. I think Moses Itauma and November, the way that they're speeding and pushing and pressuring and forcing his career to go a certain way in a max warp speed, I say November is right on point. You know, a lot of people, I don't even think they're looking at years. I think they're looking at months with Moses Itauma. I think for whatever fucking reason, they want him to be hyped and warped that fast. And what could happen and what people don't understand about this fight, as much as I'd like to see the fight just based on what these guys can do to each other, Moses Itauma is still 20 years old. And he hasn't got tested yet chin-wise. Nobody's tested this dude yet. So how do we know what he can take? And see, a guy like Martin Bakole is dangerous to anybody, especially when you take it to him. If you're a guy that likes to show and pose your will and try to knock him out, he may very well knock you out. Joseph Parker said it himself. Yes, Joseph Parker in the second round got the knockout win over Martin Bakole, sorry. And he did admit in the first round, he got caught with a shot that bloodied his nose, that hurt him badly, but he stayed composed based on his conditioning because he was going to go in there and face a hard-hitting thumper like Danny Dubois anyway, so he was already ready and prepared for a hard puncher. You know what I mean? And that's what saved him, according to Joseph Parker. Okay? But putting him in there with Moses Itauma will be able to land. We know that. But what happens when he gets caught? That's the whole question. That's the million-dollar question right now. What happens if he catches Moses, since Moses is smaller, since Moses is not really accustomed to being hit with shots like that? What happens then? And then he gets upset. Then you've ruined a guy that was up-and-coming prospect of the year last year, and then you try to force him and pressure him into a fight and he gets hurt and he gets beat. Then what happens? You may have stunted this guy's growth maybe forever. You know what I mean? Because who's to say Jared Anderson will really be the same after that? I think he's still emotionally damaged because of that ass whooping. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if it's a good idea. I just know money talks and bullshit runs a marathon. So what Frank is saying, like, oh, I don't think that he has any business being in there with Martin Bakole. Well, if that's the case, Turki Alashikh still likes Martin Bakole based on what he's already seen, based on the favors, and based on his ability to take it to these fighters in a type of style that's appealing to Turki Alashikh. So Turki is going to use Martin Bakole again and again and again. A win, a loss, and a draw. So he's gonna keep using them, definitely. And Martin Bakole will take the fight just because Turki asked him to. You know, and if Turki Alashikh offers so much money to Frank, he's gonna give him an offer he can't refuse. Exactly. Just like they did Bob Arum with Jared Anderson. Even though Bob initially didn't want Jared Anderson in there with Martin Bakole, he still took the money now, didn't he? So there you go. If enough money comes up, 9 million, 5 million, 7 million, 8 million, yeah, he's going to take the money because that's a big money fight. And to me, yeah, the card's lit. And Billy and Martinez and Boots Ennis versus Ortiz, and you know what I mean? Those sound like good fights that could happen. If nobody pulls out, it would be a hell of a card. However, I think that's a disaster in the making, or possible disaster in the making. For one, you got Ben Davison, that is an offensive-minded fighter versus a defensive-minded one. And you better be ready with Martin Bakole if you want that smoke. Yeah, you can throw firepower all day, but what happens if it doesn't land land when you want it to land, and he ends up throwing firepower back at your ass. What happens then, Ben? See, those type of things you have to take into consideration. You got Ben Davison as a trainer. You're 20 years old. You may be too hungry, too eager, too pressured, too forced to do certain things, and people expect a particular performance out of you based on what we saw Efe Ajagba do. And Efe Ajagba's been in the game for a while, and plus he was underestimated. So, bro, that could be very, very devastating. But I would still want to see it. But you guys tell me what you think of Turki Alashikh targeting a huge fight card in November with Moses Itauma versus Martin Bakole and others. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch.